Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comment. First up, we have agenda item number 1, presentation by the Cumberland Plateau Water Authority. I'll have Jeff Dyer come on up. Yours. Do you need to say anything, Randy?
Yeah, let me say something just quickly first, if I might, for his presentation. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Randy York. I'm the city attorney. For the last several months, we've been working on a presentation or the consideration of the merger, and with the Water Authority, spent an incredible amount of time and effort. Appreciate the council and all the hard work that they put in. Recently, I've gone back and I started looking at Meadow Park Lake. And in 1939, I was reading some articles from the Crossville Chronicle. Mike Moser was a cub reporter back at that time. And it was originally set up as water for the city of Crossville. And then later it became more for recreational use, and it was set up, and in 1939, all of this was part of the WPA projects. Same time the homestead was going on, streets, highways. It was incredible what was going on back at that time. Probably beginning sometime in the 70s, in the early 70s, there were discussions about what happens if there's a drought, and what are we going to do? Can we increase the size of the dam? A number of things have occurred over that time period. And at each time, you know, it seemed like that there was always a problem that has come up. In the mid-1990s, there was a lot of discussion, and regionalization was at that time being proposed by TDEC. 2000, there was all sorts of problems, and between various utility districts. In the 1960s, most of the utility districts were set up. 1960s and early 70s. There's been a spirit of cooperation, but there's also been times when there was some pretty rough arguments and even lawsuits about water in our history. So we've been looking for a period of time at what can we do, and I started looking at all the minutes. I really started about 2010, and a rough guesstimate would be that somewhere between 50 and 60% of the time that we've had a city meeting, there was something relating to water, sewer, or something associated with it. And it was incredible. So we got to this dam issue. And when I started looking at the timetable, we have to do a referendum if there's any portion to merge with the Water Authority. What that essentially means is that the City Council will have to approve a resolution authorizing a referendum to convey certain properties to the Water Authority. That would include approximately 10 acres at Meadow Park Lake around the current dam, approximately 50 acres around the water treatment facility there. Then if you look at Holiday Lake, there's 7 parcels of property located there, and there's some on Sparta Highway. That resolution has to be approved before sometime in July to get it on the calendar or on the ballot for the November election. So the only thing that would be on the ballot is whether or not the voters would approve the conveyance of those tracts of property to the Water Authority. In reality, it's not a referendum to approve the transfer of those. It's to give City Council the authority to move forward and in their wisdom, if they think that it's appropriate to do that, to be able to go ahead and do it. Basically, it's up to the city voters. I know several months ago, maybe a year ago, this was discussed in city council meeting, and a number of our city council said, let's let the voters vote on it. Leave it up to the voters to decide. In getting to this point, I put a lot of effort into seeing what we could do to raise this dam. What's the effect? How much money is it going to cost? And irrespective of money, there is no funding solution for either the Water Authority or for the city of Crossville, because we cannot get approval from TDEC and the other regulatory agencies in time to authorize any funds or other funding. So that's it. So we're in a position where I think we have to say, are we going to do this, do it alone or not do it, or merge the water and sewer with the Water Authority. If you merge, last week I was really disappointed when I found out that we could not do some things because of regulatory obstacles. And that's been a continuing story over the years. I've gone back, that's happened many times. But that's just the way it is. And so when I was looking at this, I had thoughts about it, about what's in the best interest for the taxpayers, for the city of Crossville, and the water ratepayers, because that's what's really important at the end. We can't forget that the water ratepayers are the ones who have paid for all of the various properties and equipment, and those things belong to the ratepayers. That's been said many times by the comptroller's office and other people. So tonight, I think the dam is probably off the table. I don't think that there is any way that it can be done by this council in this year. And so there's other things to consider. And so I just wanted to let everybody know sort of where we are on things. If there is a positive vote to the referendum, and should there be a merger, many of you are employees here with the city. And I can tell you that in the worst case scenario, you remain an employee with the city at the same benefit and same everything. There's not going to be any layoff. There's not going to be any decrease in pay. That's a good thing. So there's a lot of stuff that will have to be considered, have to be negotiated, have to go through the process, and we'll cover all of that. But I don't see, the only option that I see, and this is just me personally, that I see for us ever acquiring a dam is to merge with the Water Authority. So I'll be happy to answer any questions, or that was just my statement. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Ray. With that, Jeff, that's all yours, buddy.
All right, we'll try to bring the energy level up a little bit. I appreciate that, Randy. Randy's been very helpful through our discussions and helping us gather information. I do want to thank the City Council, thank the City Manager, thanks to the employees. We asked for a ton of information from them, and they delivered. We spent a lot of time looking through that information and trying to come up with best case scenarios so that you really get to look at the real world impact of what the situation is for the City of Crossville, what the situation is with the Cumberland Plateau Water Authority, and what a situation would look like us together. So it's not just me representing here tonight. So I've got Daniel Peterson here tonight. He'll come up and share some financial analysis with you. Also in the back, Ross Colonna is here, Comptroller's office, so can verify the information we're saying is accurate and complete about regionalization and what it means for the community. But hopefully, what we do tonight with the information that's provided by the city to us is we show a roadmap of regionalization that maybe is not as scary as what some people may say. So I'm going to go through some bullet points, and hopefully I can be quicker than I normally am with you. I don't want to dig too deep into unless there's questions, council, on any bullet points, because I really want to get to the meat of it, which was the merger analysis. We want to get into that and have that discussion and have time for questions. So as for an agenda, the first part will be really core fundamentals of the Water Authority. Who are we? What do we do? What do we represent? Why are we here? What are these conversations happening? Why are you presenting these options tonight? It's really about regional water security, financial stability. It has nothing to do with city or county or past history. It's the reality of ratepayers and what we can do for them. Then we'll roll into the financial analysis and again have questions afterwards. So tonight's all about opportunity. So Randy, I'll lean on the optimistic side that we're going to get things done. We've had these discussions. I've had plenty of discussions outside of conversations with the city of Crossville, with Army Corps of Engineers, with TDEC, with agencies and funding agencies. Regionalization is the future. You're going to see this across the state. This is not a Crossville issue. This continues to happen, and conversations are drumming up across the state regionally with opportunities. So tonight, we're just presenting opportunities to you, City Council. It's for you to look at this and say, does that make sense for us, or does it not make sense for us? Joining the Water Authority, we all know, right, the population growth, aging infrastructure, long-term raw water supply concerns, increasing capital costs. I think you talked about this in your budget a while ago, right? Those increased costs, they're happening to every utility across the state. Everybody has to deal with it, but there's ways to mitigate some of the pressure off of that. What does it mean if we're joining? What does it mean for the city of Crossville? Regional ownership. You'll be part of a regional scope, regional ideas, regional conversations, and the impact from those. Shared infrastructure costs, stronger long-term borrowing capacity, operational efficiencies, greater water security, lower long-term pressure on your customers for rates, access to regional planning and infrastructure development, and a unified strategy for that drought resilience and raw water supply instead of going after it on your own. Regional water challenges are increasing. If you look across these cubes here, aging infrastructure, water sewer infrastructure replacement costs, deferred maintenance is compounding liabilities on utilities. Systems are struggling to find funding on major upgrades, water supply risk, regulatory pressure, increasing compliance, the list goes on and on. I'd say if you talk to 90% of the utilities across the state, this is happening to all of them, right? This is the push for regionalization. These cubes are what create the conversation. It's not that the city of Crossville did something wrong or mismanaged its utility. This is the reality of what we face and why teamwork puts X's on these cubes and allows us to move forward. The good news is the Water Authority was created to specifically go after those challenges. That's the sole purpose of the Water Authority. If you look at the Act, if you take time to read the Act, you will see that it is designed to help Cumberland County and all ratepayers in the county to get the maximum benefit of a public utility. The vision of the Water Authority, I don't think you'll disagree with any of these visions from the city's perspective, the county's perspective, CPWA perspective. We want to protect water resources for future generations, create financial stability through scale, coordinate for capital improvements, improve those operational efficiencies for the utility, strengthen emergency redundancy and resiliency, support regional economic growth. It's a big part of what we want to see, and we want to help reduce duplication in the utility world. Very important here what regionalization means and what regionalization does not mean. We covered this a little in our last meeting. It does not mean loss of local representation. It does not mean loss of service identity, and it does not mean immediate operational disruptions to the employees. What regionalization does mean is it's shared strength, shared planning, shared financial capacity, and shared future success. So why is Crossville critical? We look at it from the Water Authority, people may say, hey, with the debt burden that Crossville carrying, why would you even go talk to Crossville? Well, here's the reason. Crossville is uniquely positioned to benefit in a regional scope. You're the economic center of Cumberland County. You already serve as a regional population hub. You have critical infrastructure assets, and really my favorite point is the bottom, is you have technical and operational experience necessary for regional leadership. Every utility I go talk with has the best, right? They have the best operator, the best treatment manager, the best distribution manager, the best fleet manager, the best procurement manager. Right? They all have the best, but I'm saying, why doesn't every customer that buys water in Cumberland County not get the absolute best of every resource that's available? Why would one single entity maybe not get the best? Maybe they don't really have the best. They say they do, but they may not. I think they should share it. It should all be the best, no matter where you're at. So without regionalization, there's some risks just to be thinking about. Bearing a disproportionate future infrastructure cost. We're going to cover this in the financial analysis portions. A lot of this will be in detail. Increasing your debt burden, having limited access to any economies of scale, greater future customer rate pressure, and fragmented long-term planning. With regionalization, what do you gain? Well, why would you look at regionalizing? Well, you get expanded customer base supporting future projects immediately. Get a stronger balance sheet immediately. Shared debt capacity, stable rate structure, greater leverage for state and federal funding, and long-term operational resiliency. Some of our key strengths of CPWA. The reality is regionalization is here and it is actively working. You can come look at it, you can come have discussions with us, we can talk through the numbers with you, we can show the impact already of what's happening. We're growing our customer base, we're having operational integration, we're bringing in new technologies that utilities could not do as a small independent utility. We already have an existing regional governance structure that allows us to grow even beyond Cumberland County if we choose to, if it makes sense. And the regional mission's already underway. The discussions are already happening. It's not just happening here. I continue to go to board meetings with other utilities that have interest in what regionalization looks like for them. And we have a proven ability to combine systems and immediately start reducing duplication, saving those ratepayers money immediately. So we're designed to become a long-term regional water platform for the Cumberland Plateau. I want you to think we don't have our eyes on the scope of the challenges that are happening today. We know there's long-term water supply issues. We know there's wastewater expansion issues, future treatment expansion and upgrade issues, infrastructure replacement, increasing cost from the goods that we talked about earlier. The independent debt burden is some real challenges if you continue to stay on your own and absorb those debts. And then the need for these large-scale capital planning. You're going to see some numbers tonight that I think they're going to be staggering numbers to you. I think when you see them from the public's perspective, and even county, or from the council's perspective, they're large numbers, right? It needs a big plan to take care of those. I'm not going to go through every one of these, but look at the bold points. These are the immediate impacts of regionalization. Greater borrowing power, rate stabilization, shared administrative costs, and operational efficiencies. These are really the so-called business 101, right? These are the key things of what happens inside of mergers. Future regional project needs. There's been plenty of rate studies. We've talked about this. Go to the city's website, look at all the rate studies Randy just mentioned for decades, right? There's been rate or water feasibility studies and rate studies, all kinds of studies that have happened. The one thing that has not happened, though, is all the utilities coming together and there be regional water feasibility studies for a large entity. It's always been one singular utility trying to solve its needs and potentially sell water to others, but that was still the need of the original utility for survival. The impact of those regional studies was not how do we help everyone. That's what our regional studies and conversations are about. And a few points here to call out. These are metrics as we look at those financials that you'll see here in a minute. Just some things to keep in mind is that future capital cost burden, the rate increase pressure of not merging, your debt capacity, your reserve stability, your grant competitiveness, emergency redundancy, and long-term water security. But these are very simple. You look on the left, that's an independent, attack it on your own. On the right, working together as a larger team, what that impact looks like. This slide, economic development impact. I've had a lot of questions about this lately, what that looks like from the Water Authority. We're pro-economic impact, and we're not biased to the city or the county. Right? This is about growing together as a water utility. We're not so concerned about the address of where that economic growth happens. In red, really the most important thing on this slide. Regional water equals regional growth, and regional growth includes the city of Crossville. Governance, you still have representation on the board. I'll be happy to answer questions about this later, but especially for the public and those in here tonight to know the city still has representation on CPWA board. There's 3 members that are appointed by the city. You guys have 3 members on CPWA, and there's a 4th from your product that's appointed by the county mayor. So there's really 4 representatives that are there in discussion of the city of Crossville's product. So what happens if we do nothing? Well, there can be financial risk involved, infrastructure risk, water supply risk, and strategic risk. So what we're going to do now, we're going to transition into Daniel Peterson. Daniel spent a lot of time with the data that you sent to us. We're going to go through that, answer questions on that, and let you see the impact of the Cumberland Plateau Water Authority. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate you all having me. We've got some challenges facing us. What I did in my analysis, I sat down with Nathan and tried to understand the capital projects that you have and the needs that you have and how you plan on funding those. I take that information, combine that with your last audited financial statement, and try to run predictive analysis on where you are going to be when you implement those things. So in order to accomplish some of those capital projects, you're going to have to go out to the bond market and borrow that money. So you'll have increased interest costs, and you'll also have increased depreciation that you're going to have to fund through your rate structure. Combine that information with CPWA and the 3 companies that have merged together there and what their financial statements look like along with their capital needs. So we look at those independently, and then we look at them together. So I'm giving you 4 different scenarios that we'll go through tonight, and basically help you understand the potential impact of working alone versus working together. So combine the 2 entities, have about $23 million in revenue, 31,000 customers, and $109,000 of equity. CPW comes to the table with 0 debt, and the city of Crossville's water sewer debt is around $29 million. Independently, CPW has $9.3 million in revenue, 17,000 customers, no debt, $39 million in equity. City of Crossville has $14 million in revenue, 14,400 water customers, 5,500 sewer customers, long-term debt $29 million, and we've got capital projects totaling around $1.3 million. Now, let's break that capital project down into what it is. We've got $20 million sitting in CIP at the end of June 30, 25 that we're going to have to roll into and begin depreciating. So that's $20 million of that $131 million. We've got other capital projects, including the dam mitigation, which is $11 million, the reservoir build, which is $49 million, a water ceramic filters for the water treatment plant at $4 million, a continual build out and expansion of the water treatment plant at, I believe it's $16 million, And then we've got a sewer treatment plant at $30 million. Okay, so we've staged these capital projects and phased them in based on conversations with Nathan about when those projects need to be in place, when those borrowings are going to happen. So that basically summarizes the $1.3 million in capital that's coming. The question that we're asking, or that we're trying to understand the answer to, is can the city of Crossville do this independently? Does it make more sense to do that with a partner? So we're going to be talking about 4 scenarios. Scenario 1, S1, 2, 3, and 4. We're going to be combining scenario 1 and scenario 4.
That's basically the equity situation between doing it ourselves or doing it together. That scenario basically looks at the total CIP going into place with the total debt funding going into place. And then we've got our merger with that full CIP happening over there. There we go. You can't see it on the screen. That doesn't work very well. So that's far left side and far right side. Does that make sense? So we're going to do this ourselves. We're going to merge, and we're going to do the entire CIP projects. Okay. Scenario 2 and scenario 3 basically are deferring, basically putting a pause briefly. Don't know if it's going to happen or not. Can't predict whether it's going to happen or not, but pausing essentially the dam and reservoir project until we can determine whether or not it's necessary from a combined entity or whether there's other options. And so we've got 2 situations there where we're going to talk about the merged entity taking on the capital projects but pausing the dam and the reservoir, and the individual entity, City of Crossville, acting on its own, continuing on with its capital projects but pausing essentially the dam and reservoir. Okay? All right, so what we have to do in our predictions is essentially understand what is it going to take when we take on this debt, when we take on the depreciation, what is it going to take from our rates, essentially, to move those rates into a place where at least are ending the year in a positive net position. That's what the state requires, is that proprietary fund that you all operate is its own independent fund. Its revenues have to support its expenses. What we find in scenario 1 is basically we're going to be at a cumulative rate increase over that 6-year period of 63%. Let that sink in for a second. We decided to do this ourselves. Full capital projects. We're going to have to push our customers' rates up to 63% cumulatively. Now when I say cumulative, what does that mean? If I raise the rate first year 5% and I raise the rate second year 5%, I do not have a 10% rate increase. I have a 5% rate increase applied to a 5% increase, and so it has a cumulative effect. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. Color-coded here, scenario 2, basically where we defer the capital projects for the blue. That's us going alone. That's us combined with CPWA. Scenario 4, we don't do the full projects, but we merge. So those are the predicted rate increases, cumulative across each scenario. It's better to be together, whether we choose to do the entire capital project or just part of the capital project. When we look at our debt options, essentially you can see the 2 scenarios. Scenario 1 and 4 are basically aligned with that debt, those capital projects happening at the same time. For the deferred projects, that debt load is basically the same between an individual entity or a combined entity. One of the metrics we look at, sorry, I probably should have done a little introduction. I've done this for close to 30 years now, and we find ourselves in these situations where we work with management and the board and help folks understand where they're going. But we use a metric. 6,000 is a little high. I'm not a real fan of $6,000 of debt per customer. I try to target 4. But in this scenario, I ran $6,000 as the baseline. So when we're at $6,000 per customer in debt load on our own, we're going to peak at $9,300 of debt per customer. talk about putting it on a future generation. Okay. Obviously, if we defer the project, we're going to be better off. If we're together, we're even better. The other thing we look at is debt service coverage ratio. Now, understand this debt service coverage ratio has basically been established upon the rate increases that I've placed into the model. If I put those rate increases into the model and I make sure that you have a positive change in that position, you're going to have a positive debt service coverage ratio. The state requires 1.2 minimum. You have to have 1.2 times your debt service. Okay? All the scenarios, because we've modified the rates to make sure that we hit a positive change in that position, are going to be positive. But the reality is we are better together in that debt service coverage ratio, whether we do all of the projects or just part of the projects. So CPW is coming to the table with zero debt. They basically have $9.3 million of revenue, 17,000 customers. So you're able to tackle this capital project and expand essentially with an additional 17,000 people in the divisor of all of this math. So there's your scorecard, basically kind of recap. You've got your peak annual rate increase, it's going to be 17% going alone. Together, 10.5. Together with a deferred project at 6. We're experiencing cost increases of 3, 4, 5% on an annual basis. That rate increase is nothing more than that cost of living and cost of expenditure increase that we experience. Your cumulative rate increase is going to be 63% if you go alone and do all your projects, 30% if you let a part of them. Together, it'll be 30%, or 9.7. Your peak debt, 1.36 million. Your debt per customer, 9,000 per customer versus 4,200 or 2,400. Which number do you like better? Your revenue base is going to go up because you're combining those two together. Your customer base is going to go up from 14 to 31 million. Or 31,000, excuse me. So it's clear to me, and it's a mathematical equation, essentially, if I've got $131 million of projects, $131 million of debt, and I've got a $17,000 or 14,000 customer base that I'm using as the denominator in that math versus a 32,000 customer base in that math, together is going to be better. There is strength in numbers. We've heard that before. So basically, the next path is you're not agreeing to a merger. You're basically saying, yeah, let's let the voters decide. Let them be a part of the conversation. And so the goal would be to put your referendum to vote. There's your individual rate increases by year, by scenario. Any questions for me?
Can you back up 3 slides?
1, 2, 3.
Okay, just 2.
2? That one? Yeah, sure.
So your peak total debt is more combined than if we go alone,
This is you going along.
right?
Scenario 1.
Yeah.
You go along.
S2 and S3.
These two here.
Yeah. Well, yeah, them too.
It's deferring the project.
That's deferring the dam and the reservoir projects.
That's 136 million, and all the way far right is 140 million.
These two.
So we would be more in debt combined than we would be if we stayed alone.
I think that's because the CPWA is taking on debt, so that's why it wouldn't be in the first column, right?
Maybe I need to look. I'd go look at the model and clarify that for you.
In the same way with the middle two.
Yep.
Merger is higher than no merger.
Yep.
Oh, the one debt per customer. There it is. No, wait. No, yeah, there it is. It's, you got it up.
So all of that was basically gathered up. I've got something for you to take home, you can study.
Thank you.
Yeah. And certainly, if you have questions, my contact information is at the bottom of that. Feel free to reach out. Follow your questions through Jeff, if you prefer that, that's fine too. And I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, just maybe one thing I want to mention on this too is that based off the information we've also received, even at this number, we use the lowest numbers provided to us to get to these numbers. So it's not unrealistic that the numbers get that high or higher. We use the lowest number. In a perfect world, everything goes as planned for the debt. So
That's what we do, we get in trouble.
So this was showing, these numbers we're showing are typically with the minimum amount. So as you, let me go through something. So, I mean, really, from our perspective, this is about an opportunity that is here, and it's here now, and it's real. You're making decisions on, but you do have a choice to do nothing, which we showed. But that's most likely the most expensive long-term decision you'll make, which you can see by the numbers. And the question really shows that it's no longer whether regionalization is necessary or helps you. We have one water future, and the projects are too large and too expensive to tackle on your own. Combined, we're going to build stronger financial systems, protect those ratepayers, secure that water supply, improve competitiveness, and leave future generations with sustainable infrastructure. So in closing here, really, the City of Crossville, you have an opportunity to be part of a team that is designed to solve exactly what you're up against. And by joining us, you're not giving up. You're helping build a stronger utility. And it's all for the future of Cumberland County. My last slide here, and then I'll answer any questions that you may have for us. This one is a snapshot of what happens on these timelines. I started in January 2025, meeting with every utility in Cumberland County. By May of 2025, we had our first merger. January 2026, second merger. February 2026, third merger. Here we are, June 2026, waiting to see where you are. All of these had to go through the same steps that you went through. They all had to ask the questions, they all had to get the information, they had to make sure it was right for the customer. There was anger involved, there was frustration involved, all the emotions you can imagine we went through to get to the point of does this make sense for the customer. But you're at the point right now as the city that they all got to the point of what does this mean for the customer. And that's where it shifted, because they could vote and say 100% backed that this is what makes the most sense, saves the most money, has long-term effect for generations.
Do you have any questions for Jeff or Daniel?
This may be one of the biggest decisions that the City of Crossville has ever tackled, in my opinion.
I would say the largest generational transformation ever in the history of the City Council to make in Crossville.
Any questions or just?
One of the numbers that got thrown out there was something about sewer for $30 million. Is that a new sewer plant?
From the conversation, that was the new sewer plant, and that conversation has gone anywhere from 30 to 50 million. We went with the 30 million.
It was an expansion concern. You're near capacity at the sewer treatment
That's just
facility.
expansion of what we had?
It was new, for new facility. It's a new type of facility, I believe is what that was for.
But your current facility is close to capacity, as I understand it.
Okay. Okay.
I have a question that this may have been in the information here, and I was trying to follow along and may have missed it. So, Jeff, if Crossville merges with the Water Authority, will the water authority commit to immediately, officially, and legally begin to request funding sources, institute bond issuance processes, and initiate and complete the permitting process and mitigation process, and work to begin construction on a new Meadow Park Dam as a top first water priority? Long question, I can't.
Yeah, let me try to phrase
Okay.
it out here. So let's talk about, number one is if you make the decision, if it's to us that, hey, we are going to move forward, we want this to go to referendum, this makes sense for our customers, we're going to, those conversations about funding and the impact and a regional approach will already be going. So we'll be ahead of the game of those conversations in anticipation of it going through. So those will start immediately, with the caveat that, hey, they could decide down the road they don't. But right now, we're on a path that we're going that way. So let's go ahead and start working on what that funding looks like. I missed the middle question. Can you read the middle question one more time?
If it's okay, let me just read it again, because I think there's 2 or 3 parts in here that I would appreciate your input on.
Sure.
If Crossville merges with the water authority, will the water authority commit to immediately, officially, and legally begin to request funding sources, institute bond issuance processes, initiate and complete the permitting process and mitigation efforts, and work to begin construction on a new Meadow Park Dam as the top first water resource priority?
Okay. Well, I think the first piece is I talked about the funding, the bond, those conversations would be immediately in discussion of what that looks like. From my position, there would be, especially based off the financial data, right? It would not make sense to say I'm 100% going to make it a number one priority that continues on the exact schedule. Now, it doesn't mean it doesn't happen, and that's what we talked about. It doesn't mean Meadow Park doesn't happen. It doesn't mean it's not the number one solution. But to make the step immediately to continue, the impact is severe on the utility. You would want to go get funding and work on the funding piece first before you commit that we're 100%, that's happening and it's on pace, on schedule. The numbers show that it would be irresponsible to do that.
But commitment is a driving force for efforts. So I'm asking, is that a commitment
The commitment
the
to
authority would make?
The commitment on the trying to find the funding, yes,
Commitment to put your new Meadow Park Dam as your top priority?
for funding, which the funding part first.
Okay.
What's our status, Tim, on the permitting of the dam?
We've got a contract that has been reviewed by UT for the mitigation work. And I got a phone call late yesterday afternoon that UT's attorneys have reviewed it and they want to have a meeting to discuss a few things in the contract.
Who's attorney? Oh, UT.
UT, yes.
Big one.
So after this meeting, I'm getting some times from Randy when we can actually meet and discuss the contract. Randy's reviewed the contract and we've edited the contract to suit him. And once we get their changes, we would be coming back to council with the contract for the mitigation.
What I'm getting at is we just had a pretty long little meeting there in reference to the current financial standing. And I don't know that we're ready to start spending a lot more money and moving forward on raising this dam. I don't know that now's the time to do that. Now, that doesn't really have anything to do with the water authority. That's part of it. But I don't think that right now is the time. Now, I don't know when would be the time. We've only been talking about it, what, 30, 40 years? And then it's not like we're running out of water right now. I think what the studies are saying, we're looking good for 2045 or something like that. 2047.
I was thinking mid-30s. I can't remember for sure.
Somebody's got to throw it out there. We can't afford it.
This is some of the, where the conversations are different, the vision's a little different, all right? So you should have looked at that as a supply. That makes sense for the city of Crossville to do a study to find out that that's the solution for the city of Crossville and its needs. But that was not a regional approach, and everybody agrees that's not the regional solution totally. The water authority doesn't end with Meadow Park. Even if Meadow Park is going to be the next reservoir and the dam's going to get raised, and it happens, the water authority doesn't stop at Meadow Park. The city would have stopped at Meadow Park. That was the end of your burden to solve a problem. Our scope is a regional scope, so Meadow Park, if we're part of it and that happens and it finishes, we don't say, there we go, we're good, no more work to be done. We continue to go and help and work together for regional impact. Did you have a...
Yeah, I didn't want to speak for you, but you said it very well. It's the priority for the water authority is the resiliency and securing those water resources for your population, not just a population. And so that piece of it has got to be, that will be a primary focus and commitment. Which project becomes the first in line, I think, will develop from that conversation.
I have two questions. The $39 million the debt the city owes, if there's a merger, that $39 million goes to the ratepayer, 17,000 ratepayers?
The 29?
Or 20, however many,
Yeah, so it does, and that's where, we phrase this the right way here. All the customers, all right, the city customers get a better benefit out of the merger because of the debt. So it actually spreads the burden across 32,000 customers, so the 17,000 will be part of absorbing that debt.
Okay. And, so the city would not be in debt $29 million. Where does all the equipment, the city's got a lot to give, all the equipment, all that stuff, where does it physically go to?
Well, if it's parked in a place that was paid for by water or sewer funds, it would stay there.
Well,
So
say that again.
So anything that's been paid out of our enterprise funds, Catoosa and or the water.
I'm talking about backhoes, dump trucks.
If it stays where it's at.
If the water department paid for it, that's where it stays.
Well, if there's a merger, then does it go to the
Well, they
CPWA?
still don't have all
If
these
the asset was
places all
paid
over.
for by a ratepayer, it stays within water. The city can't say, well, we want that for doing roads. That's a different fund.
So if it was paid for by ratepayers, it goes to CPWA,
It'd stay with the ratepayer,
which would be CPWA.
which would be the
if
city's
there's a merger.
customer. It stays with that customer. We don't take any, there's not a takeaway.
Well,
Customer-
the city, if I'm correct, they use different equipment. They borrow and loan and, so what do you go through, what do you do with that?
I'm happy to address that. You want me to stay here?
Come on up, it's recorded.
Watch on camera, sir.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ross Colonna. I'm Assistant Director of Local Government Finance with the Comptroller's Office, and I also serve as the Designated Manager to the Tennessee Board of Utility Regulation. To answer your question, it's pretty frequent for city departments to, be loaning equipment back and forth. Sometimes streets will use a truck, and then water will use the truck, so on and so forth. This is a common question that comes up because this kind of merger isn't the first one to ever happen in Tennessee. These are becoming more and more frequent because they're fantastic ideas for all the communities that get involved in them. And so the way that this is typically done is, there can be some sort of interlocal agreement, if need be, to where, if there is a backhoe that you need it, twice a year for certain things, or you're about to do a project, you need to borrow it, you can have an interlocal agreement between two local governments to share equipment with each other if need be. Or The city can go out and buy its own. It just depends how much you need that. But because the thing is, the authority, it's a local government, just as much as this city is, just as much as a utility district is, just as much as a county is. The authority is a local government. You're not dealing with a for-profit company. So the rules by which you can share equipment and things are much easier because you're not dealing with maybe giving too much benefit to a for-profit company. And that leads to something that I heard earlier, because I want to commend this body for the work and the attention to detail that you're putting in with your budget. I walked in early, and I heard a lot of what you're talking about the budget, and you're drilling down. We were, it was 4% raise, 2%, the step raise and all that, and trying to figure out where $235,000, $245,000 was going to come from. And that's great to drill down to that level. And that's why I think it's really important to drill down to the millions, tens of millions of dollars. Because I understand that in order to fund that $235,000, $245,000, you'd have to do a tax increase. And water rates aren't taxes, but you're still writing a check to the government, right? And so, if you're having to raise your rate 60%, it's kind of a tax, right? And so, if we're drilling down to $200,000, $300,000, I think it's important to do the same over $64 million of debt, $70 million of debt, whatever it was. But I'm here on behalf of the T-Board, which we are charged with protecting the ratepayers all across Tennessee, not just the citizens of Crossville, but every ratepayer. And when the majority of your citizens live outside the city and pay 50% more in rates, it's important that all of them are considered. And when everyone can, save money and have, more representation on this board and everything, there's just no reason to not do a merger. I haven't heard, because I've been involved in these discussions for quite some time. I was here, I don't know, 8 months ago, or who knows what it was. I do a lot of these. I haven't heard a reason against this yet that is based in facts. I haven't heard anyone show me the numbers or show me the money to where this doesn't work out to the benefit of the customers of the utility. And so I just urge this local government, this body, to consider what is best for the ratepayer. Because quite some time ago, the city decided to serve water to not only the citizens, but the people around. And it was at that time that this city committed to not only serving citizens, but every single ratepayer that is paid into the system. And I think that whatever is best for them needs to be decided by this body. And my job with the T-Board, we order more mergers a lot. Not a lot, but from time to time. And I've yet to experience one where someone has given me a reason why it's a bad idea.
He's up here. Any questions, comments, thoughts?
Yes, sir, I have a question for you.
Sure.
It was sort of deferred to you earlier.
Okay.
If a water use study was done and it was objectively determined that the cost of providing service to a customer outside a geographic boundary is really no different than providing the cost of that product to someone inside the geographic boundary, then what does T-Board do, and what are the options of what they can have us do?
So are you saying that if a study finds that serving someone in the county versus in the city, it's no different in price?
If a use payer outside the geographic boundaries of the city, in other words, they've not been annexed into the city or not, but they receive city water and they're paying a higher rate, and the use study confirms that there is no difference in the cost of providing that service, then what does T-Board tell us?
So the T-Board would, for anyone who didn't hear, essentially if someone who lived in the county came and made a complaint to the T-Board and said, we're paying too much, the T-Board would look into it, and then we would order the city to complete a rate study, a cost of service study, to ensure that everyone is paying their fair share. That every single person, doesn't matter if you're a giant industry or just a house, that everyone is paying their fair share. And if it's found that the people inside the city are paying not enough and the people outside the city are paying too much, then we would order you to follow the math and make sure that everyone is paying their fair share. And you know that in this instance, that would mean that the citizen rate would go up and the county ratepayer rate would go down in that hypothetical that you gave. Because again, we just want to make sure that everyone is treated fairly and you're not mistreated simply because of where you live.
Thank you.
Step further, what if you told us that and we didn't do it, what would happen?
So if you didn't listen to us,
hypothetically speaking.
And so it's at that point where y'all, for the benefit of y'all, you would stop hearing from me and you would start hearing from the attorney. And my attorney would talk to your attorney a whole lot because we would take you to the Chancery Court. And then it would be up to you to explain to the court why you shouldn't follow the law and why you shouldn't follow the math and why you should give preference. And, you know, because essentially you're engaging in discriminatory business practices, and you would have to convince the court why the discriminatory business practices are beneficial and legal.
So, do you work for the comptroller?
Yes.
Does the T-Board work under the comptroller's office?
So the T-Board is a separate entity, but the comptroller's office staffs the T-Board. So I'm a comptroller employee, I am paid by the comptroller's office, but I wear multiple hats, and one of my hats is I work for the T-Board.
And when was T-Board established?
So the T-Board was first established July 1st of 2023, but as a result of the Utility Management Review Board, which was established
86.
in 86, thank you, Nate, and the Water and Wastewater Financing Board, you got that one off the top of your head?
It's the same year.
Okay, so these two boards, they were used to regulate utility districts and then cities, counties, and authorities respectively. And then in July of 23, we voted to merge those boards together.
A merger.
Yeah, we had a merger because we found economies of scale works, and now we can better serve everyone.
Full circle there. All right, so we got the guy here. What questions do you have?
I have one last question, Mr. Dyer.
Okay.
The logic on the board of directors, since the city has a lot to give, why do they only have 3 representatives when the county has 4? They don't have as much to give.
Talk a little bit about that, but when you say there's as much to give, there's also as much for us to take, right? $29 million in debt.
I'm with you.
Right, so that comes off that asset value. Like, you've got a heavy debt load that comes with that. So it's not as fair of an exchange as it may look from an asset value. I was not part of creating the board that currently exists, right? I work under that board. That board is my 7 bosses. I didn't draft that. It was agreed upon between city and county at some point that that was the structure to go by at that time. That's what passed through the act, and that's what's there. From my understanding, you have 3 appointed representatives by your mayor. You have 1 representative by the county mayor. That's how that 4th one was fair out of the 7 boards. That was the checks and balance. Because Catoosa is your product. It's served by your water. That representative is your representative.
So is there term limits for the board?
They're appointed.
They're staggered?
They're staggered and they're appointed, yes.
But then you got one in South.
Yeah, and here's a good point about this, by the way. They started that way. It's the initial, right? It's the initial startup of the water authority. We had a good discussion in here yesterday about this. Our chairman is out of Crab Orchard Utility. Well, what happened to Crab Orchard Utility when it merged? It dissolved. There's no Crab Orchard Utility. So he represents everyone that's in contact now with CPWA. Right? So his decisions are made as a whole for the whole customer base at this point. In the initial setup, I mean, he's in those discussions there as a representative of Crab Orchard before any utility joined. But once Crab Orchard joined, he's now CPWA looking out for the greater good of everybody.
The whole county?
Of members of CPWA.
Who is that?
Anybody that's a member of CPWA.
Who is that, Mr. Dyer?
That's Greg Hansen. He was the Crab Orchard representative.
Okay.
He's the chairman of the board at this point.
So is that what happened with South? He's just
Same thing with South.
West?
That representative, a CPWA board member.
So that's where they all came from to start with?
They started by the Act. The Christian Act had to have a board. It had to set up and establish governance of how this is going to start. There was no utilities involved, right? It took 2 years to get the first utility. And it started in 2024, the Act passed. 2 years later before you actually see utilities merge. So there had to be a management team to start.
Well, you know the question I want to ask. Yesterday, I asked Mr. Hanson the question. I asked this question. I said, there's 4 appointments by the county and 3 by the city. The Catoosa one is the one that we're interested in. Would there be any opposition if that was a joint appointment, one made by the city and by the county? That way the county would have 3, the city would have 3, and there would be a joint one. And he advised that he did not see any opposition to that. He would be open to discussions about it.
But interestingly, that appointment's crafted into the legislative act, is it not?
It is, and so what would have to happen is we would have to pass an amendment to the private act, I think the county would too, and then process that to the state and let our state representatives handle it, and then he'd come back and we'd have to vote on it again, and that would become law.
Jeff, can you elaborate on, just say for example, you took in Bonnie Crawford or entity, Utility X, and Utility X decides when they come in, hey, we'd like that legislative act to be revisited because we'd like to have an appointment to that board as well. And you've pointed out that it would require that to be looked at, the act restructured or recrafted. But any future utility that merges would not only, I think, be entitled to have a representative, but that there is a path forward for that, correct?
I appreciate it. That's a great question, and very rarely do I get to ask that, but it's a great question because I thought about that when I came on board, and I do think if we were to go into another county and a utility from another county joins, it would make sense that we work on a path that there's a representative. I think the mayor from that county that would be the final approval on that merger would also want that for the citizens of his county. I don't think that would be a weird situation or scenario. So I think, I can't speak for my board, I'm just saying from me in general, that makes sense. And I think it probably would to everybody in this room. If you live in another county and your mayor just joined into another county, you probably want some representation.
How many people on the VEC board?
I don't know their board count, but they're from different counties. Middle Tennessee Gas is from different counties.
TVA, they don't know board.
Well, that's a great point too. I mean, look, it's important to have the right board in place. But
VEC board is elected.
I wonder that about the Water Authority board. Who knows the names of the people on the Water Authority board? I mean, those are real. It's a real concern.
Depending on the crafting of that, would you foresee that out-of-county mayor would be entitled to make that appointment, or would current county mayor be entitled to?
I think it would be that mayor of that county.
Really?
It would be that mayor. That would be the way I would see that happen. The other part that our
You gotta be in that district, that one district.
you could also have an argument the other way.
Mr.
Let's say
Bond.
the city says, we're going at that on our own. We're going to do it on our own. We've got our own path and our own plan. You could almost see the other areas going, well, why do they have representation on it at all? If they're not even willing to participate in it.
Right,
So
right.
It's just easy to go the other way.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other questions?
I have one, Ross, if you don't mind. There were several amendments to the utility merger statutes this year.
Yeah.
And Can you briefly describe, and it even gets more complicated when you have a water authority and a municipality
Yeah.
as opposed to utilities. What is your understanding of the process?
So the legislation was updated this year based on, as we said earlier, back when the legislation was passed in 2023, rereading, getting feedback on things that just needed to be cleared up a little bit. The main thing regarding the mergers was we did multiple things. Some of them had to do explicitly if the T-Board was ordering the merger. And in that instance, it allowed for utilities to look into expanding their board and certain circumstances. But the main thing, and the most important one in my opinion, was for when utility districts were seeking voluntary mergers. And it clarified the requirement as to how they would interact with the county mayor or county mayors when there were multiple counties involved. And so it really just clarified that what the county mayor's role was in that instance, and it changed the reporting requirements on that. It didn't give us any more authority in when we could order mergers. I don't think that emboldened anyone to be able to make a merger more easy. It really just clarified, hey, if you're going to do a merger, this is when you need to talk to the county mayor and what their involvement was. Was there a reason or did that help?
I've read it 2 or 3 times.
And you still...
And it's still sort of like mud.
Yeah.
And because there's probably 10 or 15 different statutes that are affected by the legislation.
Yes.
And so, but as far as I can tell, the process that we go through is essentially the same process that we did with West Cumberland, South Cumberland, and Crossville.
No, it's the same exact process. Really, the biggest thing that changed was the reporting to the county mayor. And then the other big thing that legislation did was, and I don't know if this is true for y'all, but I sure hope it is, utility governing bodies that serve utilities, you have to get training. I really hope everyone's up to date on their training. But all it did was it took all of the training legislation and it just threw it under one part of the code so it wasn't spread out everywhere. But, I mean, I am more than happy to send you my, because that was our bill that was ran. I can send you our summary of it, and maybe that'll help clarify.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and that'll at least help you understand what the intent of the bill was. And if we were wrong, we're more than happy to discuss it.
This is a great conversation. We spent a good hour and 15 minutes on this. Is there any other questions from council? So here's the deal. I want to take some action steps. Thank you all that came here for presenting. I think there's 2 things that I got out of this, and let's have a conversation and we can move on. I think, one, we need to have a discussion and take action on next steps with the water authority. Either we need to consider moving forward or not. And so I would like for that to be put on the agenda. 2, the conversation came up about the dam. We need to make a decision on if we're going to continue to move forward with that or not. Or if we need to punt it for a period of time, depending on how things go with the previous discussion item that I just mentioned. So, are you all fair with that? Yes, Randy?
Could I make a modification of what you just said? So the discussion as it relates to a merger will occur after the referendum. The main thing that has to occur now is to prepare and to vote on a resolution to send to the election commissioner as authorizing a referendum and setting forth the fact that we want to convey potentially, it's not mandatory, none of this is mandatory until the city council votes on it after the referendum, but to allow you to convey the real property particularly as it relates to Meadow Park Lake, but the other properties as well.
So it sounds like what needs to be in order is that the discussion on the dam needs to be done first, and then the discussion on referendum needs to be second.
So how can we take a vote next week before the before referendum, Randy?
What you do is take a vote on whether or not to authorize a referendum on the issue of whether or not
So your
you have
question, Mayor,
permission
was to merge next week.
We don't have that authority as council. The only thing that we can do is send it to referendum,
Correct. So what-
being on the November
Well, I
election.
misunderstood what you said then. So you won't put on the agenda number one is what?
We need to talk about what are we doing with the dam? Are we continuing to move forward? Are we stopping? Are we pausing? Because then that will then set up, I think the conversation next would be, do we or not do a referendum? You know, so that's my thought process. If we'll all, at this
So
point.
you said do or do not referendum. I thought we will do a referendum.
I don't know what the vote's gonna be.
We
I'm
have
not
to
gonna ask
vote
anybody, and
whether
we're
or
not.
not to
yeah.
do a referendum.
And we
So
can't,
we'll be voting whether to do a referendum or not.
yeah, but we're not, we're just not
But
discussing.
not next Tuesday.
I think the first agenda item should be whether we choose to press on with the water authority, because depending on that answer determines whether there needs to be a vote
So
on
fair enough.
referendum.
So then that would be that.
And then
And
that,
the dam,
and
and
then the
then the
dam.
referendum? Okay, now, if the referendum is, or what do you, so you're saying, go ahead.
The decision of whether to merge or proceed with the water authority, then depending on that answer, a referendum may or may not be needed. And then, are we going to proceed with the
Yeah,
dam or
okay.
pause it or that?
So potentially there may be 3 items. So the third item may not occur depending on the first item.
So next week, if it's a 3-2, a majority, then there might not even be a referendum?
Yeah, because we then, at no point, we then decide no longer to move forward.
Yeah, I'm for referendum.
Okay, that's fine. There's no business tonight, but just, I think
Nope.
those 3 things.
No?
So,
So let's work this through. I think Mark makes a good point.
so just to clarify, CPWA discussion,
That if we want to move forward or not,
yes, and then the dam discussion.
on if we're going to do it or not, or postpone it. And then the
And a
third,
resolution to send to the election.
only if
commission.
the first one,
Works out.
and then the
if
second one
not,
would
we'll
then
just
clearly
remove it from the
detail
agenda.
what needs to be on the referendum, right? Because we may say we want the referendum, but we may want them to do the dam. You see what I'm saying? We may have specifics on how we want the referendum.
Because only a referendum's required, Randy, I don't want to misspeak, only a referendum's required if we want the input as to whether we want to transfer assets in any capacity to the water authority. That's what a referendum would be sent for.
Yes, let me clarify if I might, okay? And I'll be happy to prepare a resolution, a proposed resolution for your consideration. So, the city charter says that as it relates to Meadow Park, any part of Meadow Park Lake, the properties, there's 1,475 acres out there. And we're talking about 10 acres in one location and 50 acres, more or less, in another location. So that is a mandatory referendum, okay? So anything else, though, can be done as we normally convey property. The problem is, if there was enough voters that objected to it, then that would have to be included on the referendum. So I would suggest, let's include all the properties that would be conveyed in the event that there was a merger. And if you'll give me, I've already prepared the proposed resolution, and I can read it to you in just a second if I can pull it up. And you'll bear with me just a second. But did that answer your question, Dr. Fox?
I perhaps didn't ask my question the right way. I thought we only need to consider formation of a resolution to send to the election office to be on the November 5th ballot if we chose to partner or merge in some way with the water authority that would result in any of those assets that you just named being transferred.
So the merger issue, keep in mind, the only thing that the charter requires is approval by a majority of the voters as it relates to the sale or transfer or conveyance of property. Okay? That will be the resolution. And the reason for it will be a potential merger. So if the city voters voted in favor of the referendum to give the city council permission, then you, at that time, could decide to do the merger. The merger does not require a referendum. The sale of the property and the conveyance of the property does.
And if, you know, it doesn't guarantee that it's happening. It's also allowing the next council to have that information in front. You know, if it's a 70-30 vote to do it, then the next council knows that that needs to be a priority. If it's not, then, you know what I mean, but we have to have a referendum. So if that's something that, that's something that we want to pull out, you know, in regards to moving forward or not. So anyways, so we got that on there? Okay. All right, next, number 2. Discussion regarding approval of lease with grinder staff thank you all for your aircraft leasing.
Yes, the original lease with Grindstaff is coming to expiration date. And so we have discussed with them about renewing it, and they wish to renew it. There's a formula that's set forth in the agreement as to how we determine the rate.
So was it $1,040 a month in the beginning and what it has been for the last 20 years?
It was $1,040
A year?
a year. Yeah, so now it goes to an actual rental of the hangar. It was a ground lease before.
Okay. And who created this formula? No, it's $1,081 and some odd cents.
Per month, yes. And we did, in negotiations with them, the formula was much higher than this, but they've spent recently $65,000 on a floor, so we gave them credit for that floor in their rate.
So let me ask you that, is it any type of improvements like that, will that now be on us, or will they be doing those?
They're doing those, yeah.
Even moving forward? Do you guys else have any other questions? If not, we'll add that to the agenda. Next up, discussion regarding main line extension variance for Frost Road water line extension. Is this Tim or?
Frost Road water line?
Yeah, it's planning commission recommendation to. There's a section on Frost Road that there is no water line. Our water line ends and Cumberland Plateau Water Authority's water line ends. And in this section, they want to build a house. They're asking for a private service line to extend. It's cheaper to do that than put in a main line, and they need a variance to do this.
Okay.
If there was other developments, though, whoever did the development would have to put in a main line extension at that point rather than a service line.
No, get rid of that yet.
And the planning commission recommended to approve this, and it was unanimous.
And this property is in the city or in the county?
It's in the county.
There.
It's what they call no man's land. It's between Crossville Water and West Cumberland.
There's the map.
There you go.
Who owns the property?
Any other questions? We'll add that to the agenda. Number 4, discussion regarding approval of fee schedule for cemetery burials.
Yes, we're recommending an increase in the fee for cemetery burials. The city clerks looked at this and along with Billy Poor and determined that we're not covering our cost on these burials, so we're recommending an increase.
Okay.
And also including a different rate for opening and closing on holidays, which we did not have before.
Is this something that we'll just try to put on every 2-year cycle to determine cost, or is this something every year that these departments, Billy and his team, will look at?
We can do that, yeah.
Okay, we'll add that to the to the agenda. Discussion regarding approval of contract with Waycaster CPA LLC.
This is who does our audit, and it's just time to renew the contract, and we recommend approval for another year.
Add that to the agenda. Discussion regarding approval of the Sports Authority budget. Nathan, are you doing this?
It just requires that, because of the way they're reported with the audit, the comptroller wants their budget to be approved by you all. So you're not saying it's the best thing ever. You're saying we've seen it, That's the budget they're going to do, and it has to be submitted with hours. They've already approved it on their end. This is just us adopting their budget, so we can submit it with hours.
Okay.
And it's just the construction, that's all the thing that's on there is the construction.
Yeah, there's not much to look at. Okay. You guys are okay? We'll add that to the agenda. Discussion regarding approval for construction of Beaver Trail.
Yes, the construction of Beaver Trail was presented to the Leisure Services Committee in partnership with Friends of the Trail. They have recommended that they go ahead and do the work. There's no cost to the city for this trail, but it does recommend council approval because it's on city property.
Questions?
It'll be above the water line. It's a dam foundation.
Probably.
Good question.
If I live long enough to see it rise.
That's going to replace the city.
Okay, we'll add that to the agenda. Number 8, discussion regarding approval of appointment during city manager's temporary absence.
I'm not planning to be absent, however, charter requires that I have someone on file to serve in my capacity if absent, and I'm recommending Leah Crockett for that position.
Very good.
Is she amicable to accepting that? Hesitantly? Begrudgingly? All right, we'll add that to the agenda. Number 9, discussion regarding approval of asphalt delivery for fiscal year 26-27. And then if you're okay with it, I'll go ahead and add in number 10, discussion regarding approval of asphalt pickup for fiscal year 26-27. Both of those are bids.
Annual bid, only one bid received from my
Go back
district.
to the last one.
I don't know what's happening.
We'll add both 9 and 10. Be good?
The HIDA grant.
Oh, it's next. I'm gonna look for it.
Next up, number 11, discussion regarding approval of wastewater facility plan update.
And this is something that was discussed at a work session previously to move forward with a contract to evaluate the wastewater facilities and determine what is needed in the future. And we've included that in the 26-27 budget, the contract cost.
Okay, any questions? We'll add that to the agenda. Next up, number 12, discussion regarding approval to accept HIDA grant contract.
Yeah, we recommend approval of this grant, the amount of $19,000 to help with overtime for high-intensity drug trafficking area. Did you have something to add there, Randy? Oh.
So we're need to accept free money or money free dollars?
So, just a question about that right quick. So does that mean that we have to have an officer on HIDA?
I've got an officer on HIDA.
And is there a mutual aid or a memorandum of understanding?
HIDA's usually work here in Crossville, Cumberland County. They're also on task force with the FBI.
Right, but I'm just asking, do we have a mutual aid agreement with them?
With HIDA? Yes.
If you could you send that to me?
Well, it's in the contract.
Okay.
So do we need to have that pending your
In the
review?
grant
and approval?
contract, is that what you're saying? Okay, so it should be attached to the file.
Okay. I will look at that before next Tuesday. I think it's fine. But
Okay. Next up, we'll do 13 and 14 together. First up, discussion regarding approval of annexation resolution and plan of services for Bob Tollett Road, which is tax map parcel 127-080.01. And then again, discussion regarding approval of annexation resolution and plan of services for Wayne County Road, tax map parcel 126-006.02. These both were recommended and approved unanimously by the Planning Commission, but final approval does rest at council. So, questions? Okay, we'll add those to the agenda. And then next up is 15, discussion regarding approval of the temporary street closure for the Veterans Day Parade. It's just the same route that they did last year, right? Or that they've been doing.
I think it's different because it ends at the Methodist Church. Don't think they did that last year, but it does start at CCHS.
Is it ending sooner, or is it?
Yes,
Okay.
I think it's been last year.
Um,
And they going down to,
It's the same one they done last year.
So it's the same one we did last year?
I
Okay,
thought it
sorry.
was. Because they changed it last year a little bit. Okay, all right. Any questions? We'll add that onto the agenda. That brings us to the conclusion of our work session. Is there anything else that council would wish to add or discuss?
Did you skip 14?
No, we did 13 and 14 together, ma'am.
Oh, thank you.
Plan of services, yeah. All right, that brings us in. We're done. Thank you.